Welcome back to the I Am Symposium, the winter solstice of 2017. And this is a gathering of all the people who have helped me along the way to birth my book, Winds of Spirit. And Winds of Spirit took me inward for 4 years. Before that, I'd learned all the marketing strategies and had all of that down. And then I went quiet for 4 years. And then I had to come back out. And when I was doing so, the natural person for me to go to, well, it might not seem so natural because she's half my age, was Kimra Luna. And I figured she was doing something online that I wanted to do because I think Winds of Spirit is going to really appeal to family, children, and the whole next generation of spiritual seekers. So for me, it was like a natural fit. Let me tell you about her bio. Kimra Luna is the founder of Freedom Hackers. She teaches Facebook marketing, how to grow a personal brand, how to create your first web page, etc. Her whole goal is to help people build businesses and brands around the things that they care about. Today, however, we're going to talk to Kimra about a side of business she has not publicly shared. Business is no longer about just having the tools in place to get the job done, but the energy that makes your brand thrive. Kimra's hero's journey includes a rags to riches story. She went from living on welfare to an apartment overlooking the Hudson River in New York City. She is a mom first, while maintaining a very public persona as she grows her business. She recently started a new blog called Sacred Mama, which will be about her healing journey, conscious parenting, and building thriving relationships. Welcome to the I Am Symposium. Thrilled you're here.
Thank you for having me. I was very, very, very happy to come on today.
I know it's kind of a subject matter for you that you really, a lot of people who know you and have been in your classes know a little bit more about you, but for the most part, you look like this young, bustling woman out there with the purple hair. And so today we're going to talk about some things that got you where you are today.
Yeah. And I think it was funny that, inside of the email you had sent me, you had said, like we were going to talk about, the winds of change. And this year, that could probably be the name of 2017 for me. There's been pretty huge, dramatic changes in my life. There's been changes in my business, just changes and shifts in me just spiritually and emotionally. And a major physical change, I guess, so to speak, was actually the divorce and separating from my husband, who I had been with for 11 years. Basically, all of my 20s, I was with the same person. And having relationship coaches and all this therapy and all this sort of stuff really brought everything out of me. Like it all just came out on the table. And, it's been a very interesting past few years. But I really first started, like learning about personal development and personal growth right when I had actually met my now soon-to-be ex-husband back in 2004 or 2005-ish. And he introduced me to The Secret. And I'm sure everybody watching this has heard of The Secret. But to me, it was just the concepts of that were things I had never heard of. I was so blown away that, I could create my own life and that, there were people out there who could help in this and assist me in this. And there were books and so much information on this topic. And I remember when I first got into the topic, it was very overwhelming because, first of all, I had to accept responsibility for my life. And as you know, like a person like myself, I was, raised on welfare. I was raised in a very abusive home. It wasn't our habit of taking responsibility for our own actions. It was more like blame the other person. It's always the other person's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the police's fault. It's whoever's fault it is. It doesn't matter. We always blamed it on other people. And when I started learning how to take responsibility for my own life, it was very hard. I was like, oh my gosh, like I attracted these weird things into my life or horrible circumstances, and I have to be responsible for my own energy, like what I put out into the world. And I just remember like, you know, reading all these books and like learning all these things that I had never even heard about before, like at all. Like, you know, and you had asked me about like what are like some different tools and things I've used. Gratitude is probably the biggest tool that I've used. And the crazy thing is I never had felt gratitude before. Like it wasn't a feeling I really knew even what it was. And I remember reading, I can't remember which book it was. It was one of Wayne Dyer's books. And it had said, you know, like, oh, you know, like, you know, have a gratitude practice and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, okay, like, oh, I'm grateful for the air I breathe. I'm grateful for birds singing or whatever. But I wasn't feeling it, you know, like I didn't know how to feel it. And I remember it took me quite a while to really feel like what real gratitude is. And now when I feel gratitude, I'm like sobbing, you know what I mean? like, cause I could feel it so strongly, and there's just tears in my eyes when I'm so grateful for something. And recently on Facebook, I had asked my audience, you know, like, actually, it wasn't even on my business page. It was on my personal page. I just asked, you know, my friends, you know, like, what is the last thing that, you know, you experienced that was, you were so happy you were crying, you know, and all these people shared all these beautiful experiences. And it's kind of crazy because this past like month, it's been happening to me all the time, you know, where I'm just like so happy I could just cry. And I really hope that people get to that point where they're so happy they could cry so often. And, you know, I'm like, oh, I have to fix my makeup all the time because I'm like crying constantly. But it's because I can feel that gratitude. And over the years, it's getting stronger and stronger, the practice of gratitude. So that's definitely probably one of the biggest tools I've always used over the years. The next one would be just visualization. So I'm a person who loves Pinterest. Okay. So I'm like a Pinterest junkie. I have been for, I'd say 7-ish years now. And I love Pinterest because you can go and search for things you like, and then you just pin all the things that you think are really cool or interesting or fun or things like that. And I would make these vision boards on there, and I would have them for different topics in my life. So like what I wanted out of relationships, what I wanted for my children, because, you know, I have 3 kids, and obviously I want to provide, you know, great education for them and great experiences for them, you know, and, you know, I just kind of like almost like bucket list kind of sort of things. And back in 2006, or not 2006, it was 2008. I was living in Virginia at the time. No. Hold on. I'm messing up my years. 2010. It's 2010. I was living in Virginia, and at the end of the year, I was making my kind of dream board for the year, and I had pinned on there an apartment in New York City that had floor-to-ceiling windows. Right. And I had, you know, no idea like I was ever going to move to New York City. I was living in the middle of nowhere in Virginia at the time. And I was just a stay-at-home mom. I didn't even have a business at the time. And I decided that, you know, I was like, you know what? I really want to someday own a place in New York City, or at least be in New York City. And I had pinned this picture, and I didn't even remember I pinned it, right? And then I ended up moving to New York City, like, you know, like it was like what, like 5 or 6 years like later. I ended up moving to New York City, and I had no clue about this pen. I didn't remember this pen that I'd penned. And I started looking back through my different boards, because I keep them like private, like on Pinterest. You can have private boards and public boards. They're just like my little private kind of dream boards I have on there. And when I looked through, I was like, oh my gosh, this looks exactly like the apartment I'm living in. And it wasn't the exact same apartment, but it was almost exactly the same. Like the way the living room was set up and things, I was like, this is like my apartment. So I really feel like, you know, I put those things into, you know, what I wanted to create out of my life. I just was like, you know what, these are things that I really love, and I would desire to have. And I ended up having it. And it was years later, of course, but I didn't just focus on it. I wasn't like, oh my God, I have to move to New York City. It was more like, you know what? It'd be super amazing if I lived there. I think I'd feel really great. And then eventually I did. And so it was really just interesting experiences when it comes to visualization. And I don't even necessarily sit and just focus heavily on visualization. Like if I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to have 5 new clients, I don't sit and like just visualize that necessarily. I just spend my time focusing on what feels good, or even like, well, what's going to happen after I have those clients, or what's going to happen after I get those new students. I just like to really think about, I'm just a visual person, I guess. Like I love looking at pretty pictures and things like that. So, this past weekend, I was up in the forest. There's a forest here in New York. It's called Inwood Forest, and it's the last natural forest in Manhattan. So all the other forests are kind of like fake forest, I guess. They like replanted them later or something. But this one's like an actual natural one. And just being out there, and I was under the full moon. It was a super moon. And, I was just like setting, my intentions under the full moon, and was just like, you know what, this moon, it just felt so pure and so peaceful. And I've now recently recognized too, like I do need a lot more nature, because I'm a city person now, and so I've been, making it like my goal to make sure I at least get into nature at least once a week, go for walks more often, get the fresh air more often. And I just moved into a new place that's right on the water. So I want to make sure I go and connect with the water every single day, make sure my kids are connecting with the water and they're staying really grounded here. But yeah, it's so that's kind of like all the stuff that I've used over the years to really be able to create an amazing life for me and my kids.
That's great. That might be a nice challenge for all of you listening is, what was that first book that set you on your path? I know I was in the Dominican Republic, and or St. Thomas, and there on my friend's table was Buffalo Woman Come Singing. Now, she wasn't what you really say spiritual in a shamanic way, and she didn't even know to this day why that book was sitting on that table. So we always get to something that opens us up spiritually. And I guess what I want to ask you is, I know that you've really worked hard on yourself to get here. And so this conscious uncoupling that you've been involved with, because I know that your children are primary focus for you. I've seen them in your videos, they're cute. You've talked about how individual they each are. And so how, as a mother, are you introducing this next phase into your life, being a businesswoman and a spiritual entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. And I'm really grateful that me and my ex-husband had hired, relationship coaches to kind of help us through the process. Because as most of you know, divorces and even just split ups in general, even just breaking up with a boyfriend, it could be kind of nasty. And, me and my ex have done our very best to keep it as peaceful as possible, primarily for the kids' sake. But, we really wanted to keep it really peaceful. And it's really interesting because my son, he has a cousin, and one of his cousins, his parents were divorced. And they're on Minecraft, like, all the time, just chatting, and they're on Skype, just, like, chatting. And I could hear them talking from the other room. And his cousin, he has now, his dad was, dad and mom are divorced, but the dad remarried, and now the mom remarried. And he is, like, so happy about it. He's like, I have 2 moms and 2 dads. And I think that kids, they only get the perspective of things of what they see. Like, to some kids, a divorce could be so dramatic and depressing, and it's just so hurtful to them. And with my son, he is seeing it from like a positive perspective. He's seeing like, wow, I get to have an extra dad or an extra mom. Like, I get to have a bonus person in my life, so all of that has been really just an interesting thing. And I remember it was really difficult because I was like, wow, what are we going to like say to the kids, and my oldest son, he's just so wise. He's like leading me. Like, he's like my guide in life is my oldest son. And he's like 8 going on 30, he's so mature. And when we told him, he was just like, oh, okay, so daddy's gonna move out? And I was like, oh yeah, eventually, he'll be moving out, he'll have his own place, eventually you'll go get to hang out at his place. And he's like, oh, that sounds really nice. And like, that was like it. Like, he like wasn't like, you know, scared or anything. And I'm sitting here like terrified, like I'm going to be traumatizing my kid by saying that we're getting divorced. And, you know, I feel like sometimes kids, they just have that like a different awareness than we have. You know, to him, he just assumed everything was just going to be okay. And me, I'm like panicking, you know? And so I think it's really important, and really, I'm so grateful that I have children, because I feel like I said, they're like guiding me in that way. They help keep me grounded. They help keep me on earth, because I tend to start floating off the planet sometimes. And so, you know, they keep me grounded, and when they just say things like that, I'm just like, oh, it is going to be okay, you know, like it's going to be just fine. And it's been a really interesting transition too, like with my business, because, you know, I've had for like 2 years, I really wanted to start sharing a lot more about my healing journey and the trauma that I've healed from my past. And, you know, my ex-husband, he wasn't really like on board with that. He didn't want me to talk about that, the fact that I was molested when I was younger, or that I was raped when I was 20, or like, he didn't want me to really talk about those things publicly. And it was really hard for me to like hold those things in and hold those things back. And so that's how I know that, like, you know, the separation it wasn't just like, oh, we're just separating because like we're like not in love anymore. It's like that separation was really like a polling for me of like the universe saying like, okay, you're separated now you have permission to say those things you want to say and speak your truth that you've been wanting to speak for so long. And it just gave me permission. And so now I have permission to really be myself and be in my truth as much as possible. And I'm still working on that, you know, over the past few years. You know, I definitely wasn't right in my mental space at times. And, you know, I've had to go and apologize to people and say, you know, please forgive me for how much I sucked at that time in my life. Or maybe I have taken up too much time of a friend's time because I was going through so much stuff. I didn't even realize that they were going through stuff too, and I should have been supporting them, you know? So I've had to go back, apologize to people, and it's just been a really humbling experience. You know, when I'm just like, you know what, like I sucked at that time, and it sucks that I sucked at that time, but I feel finally like I'm like 2017 is like coming to an end. And I feel like with, you know, like this new, like the new solstice and all this, just there's all this new energy for me. And I'm really working very hard to just embrace it for myself, embrace it for my children, even embrace it for my ex, because he has a lot of new things as well. He's having to like get a new job. He's like having to get his own apartment. Like a lot of newness, I guess, is happening for me. New in my life. And then of course my new blog and everything. So just everything is new, fresh, clean slate.
And the only way we get to those new, fresh, clean slates is understanding that relationships have a life. Mm-hmm. They have an energy to them, and, you know, that we can grow apart and change. And mm-hmm. what's interesting, and I think for you know, the spiritual people listening, is that he brought the secret to you. Like, so it wasn't that you both weren't spiritual beings having this human experience together, and yet it's still, there's a place where things don't work. Talk about when things don't work and changes, like, you know, you're a business person. So how do you know, like, when a business has come to, you know, a natural end, or a relationship has come to a natural end? I think that's an important topic.
Yeah, it is, because like for myself, you know, with my ex, we had been together for a lot of years. I mean, 11 years is a long time to be together, especially when you're young and you're still like growing as a person. And both of us were very much into personal development. We were both really growing. And a lot of people say, oh, if the person's not growing, then of course you're going to like grow apart. But for us, it's like we were growing and we still grew apart. You know, we just grew into different paths as we discovered ourselves. And, you know, I think that there's usually like a strong feeling, like even for myself, before I moved to New York City, I knew that was the beginning of the end for me and my ex. Because I remember when I was moving, I was like, you know what? If he didn't come with me, it really actually wouldn't even bother me. Like, I would be okay just being a single mom with my kids in New York, you know, like I would be okay with that. And I think when I knew that that was something, like, I was like, you know what, like, we'll try to make it work. We'll do the best that we can. And if it doesn't work, it's going to be all right. And so I think I started trusting the universe to tell me when it was going to be its end. And there was like one clear exact day when we were with our relationship coach, like talking together, when I knew, I was like, I can't be with this person anymore. Like, I just knew. And that was when, you know, a few months after that, that was when we, you know, announced that we were separating. As for business stuff, I think it's different for every person. Like, I'm a person who is, you know, called what they call quick start. So I can start things and get the ball rolling and then follow through at the end. Not so much. I'm like not so good at that, which is why I need team members to help me follow through. And it's really funny because I ran my current business for almost 3.5 years now. So 3.5 years. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm surprised this business even lasted this long, you know, because like I'm just the type of person where I'm ready to like go to the next thing. So I think it depends on the person. Some people, it's like they want to be a shoemaker and they want to be a shoemaker for the rest of their entire life until they're like 75 years old, you know, or 80 years old or even 100 years old. You know, they just want to make shoes forever or dolls forever or whatever. Like some people, they just want to do the same thing forever. Other people, I feel we kind of have multiple things inside of us. And I'm a person where I always say, like, you know, I'm a multi-passionate person. I have so many ideas and businesses and things I care about and ways that I want to change the world. And I think there's no wrong way. It's fine if you're a person that's, you know, just one straight path and like that's the thing you're going to do. I remember my midwife, she is meant to be a freaking midwife. Like that is like what she is meant to do. She's gonna be doing that till the day she dies, and she is perfect for it. Like it's exactly her mission, you know. And I think some people have that. Me, I will probably have like 18 businesses within like the next like 8 years, you know. So like it's just like, because I'm just like, I just want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. I think we're all here for different purposes, and you know, every type of business you run can have that, you know, the mission of helping people, helping the world. And I believe everybody wants to do that, unless you're like, you know, some weird narcissist or something like that. But if you're not a narcissist, you want to help people or help the planet in some way. And I think we all have that in us. And I really believe that we can all create businesses around that, or even just working in our own jobs, you know. How are we contributing to the companies we work for? How are we helping shifts happen in the companies that we already currently work for? How are we talking to our boss to help them get ideas that they can use to help change the planet? You know, so I think all of us have it within us to do those things. And I just think it's really fun to see my kids and how they see like they could change the planet. You know, they always come up with different ideas. They're like, oh, like I want to teach people how to like not be bullies because that's not nice. And, you know, and so, I'm like, well, how are you going to do that? And they're like, you know, they have to like sit down. I was like, oh, we'll write down out some ideas and, you know, maybe we can start applying those things, you know. So kids even have it in them. Everybody has it in them to want to help others and create change. And I think it's just all about not saying like, oh, I have like one life purpose, because for me, I have a lot of life purposes, you know, like one of them obviously was to be a mother. I didn't know that was my life purpose until the kids started popping out, you know, like I was not like, oh yeah, I just want to be a mother when I grow up. And, you know, it was just something that came to me. And same thing, like, you know, I love like promoting things and like, you know, like I started booking concerts when I was 17. It just came to me. It like fell onto my lap. And every single thing I've done, it kind of just, I was just like, oh, this is going to be fun. Let's try it and see how it goes. And it's always worked out pretty good, you know? So I think if we just keep following that and not having to be like, oh, I have to figure out my life purpose. Everybody has purpose, but it could be multiple things. It doesn't have to be just one thing.
That's great. And I'm a lot like you. You know, I was running ski junkets at 10 to Vermont from Springfield, Massachusetts. You know, so I could ski. So I'm a multiple person. When I finally got to the Winds of Spirit, I finally converged it all. So I suspect that will happen for you too. Let's talk about the Me Too.
Yeah.
So what is the gifts from the Me Too? You know, you talk about gratitude, and that was a hard place for me to finally find gratitude for the early abuse in my life. And I have, because there's never been a person I've ever met that I couldn't find that connection with.
Mm-hmm.
So what has it been for you coming out from the abuse and the silence of the abuse?
Yeah, it was a really, really big deal for me. And I had recently, I'd mentioned something about the rape maybe 4 or 5 months ago, but I hadn't gotten into details. And then when like the Me Too stuff started coming up, where everyone's like, hashtag Me Too, and you're seeing all of these people who have experienced trauma, and it's very powerful. But it's also very sad in a way. It's also very like, to me, it's very almost like it's almost like it's empowering, but also sometimes disempowering. Like it's weird. It's like it has the yin and the yang. It has like both sides to that feeling I get. It's like it's an up and down thing for me, because I see some people where the Me Too has triggered them and made them feel worse about the experiences and made them feel bad that they didn't come out sooner, or there's like other guilt and shame around them not speaking up about it. And I mean, something for myself, I always had this guilt and I had this shame about not saying something about the guy who raped me, because he might have raped other people because I didn't say something. He might have assaulted other people or harmed other people because I didn't say something. And that's the truth. That's the reality. And that's the truth for a lot of other women. A lot of us haven't said anything, but how do we come to a part of like where we're grateful for where we're at? We're grateful for, that we learned a lot from the experience of finally saying something that, to me, I think a lot of women felt a lot of relief that they weren't alone. I mean, I saw this woman, she was 75 years old, and she had posted on Facebook, and she said, "This is the first time I've ever said anything ever about what happened to me." She's like, "I've never told any family members. I never told anyone," so it was empowering for a lot of people, but then it was disempowering for other people. So, because then it made people feel discouraged. It made them feel like, oh my gosh, are just all the men assaulting people? And, like even now, like with all the celebrities, like that it's coming out, like all these people in, television industry and movie industry, it can make you feel like, oh my gosh, like all men are like horrible and they're all assaulting us. But it's not the truth. And so as a mother of 3 boys, it's kind of scary, because I'm like, are people going to be treating my boys like they're going to assault them? Because I don't think my boys are going to assault them. So, and then how do I raise my boys where they understand consent and things? So it's a very conflicting thing for me. But when I shared, like, hey, like this has happened to me. I've had an immense amount of trauma. I did have a lot of people reach out to me, and they said, I'm so grateful that somebody like you can say that they had a lot of trauma before they had, success in business and things like that. Like all these other women, they're celebrities, and they're like saying, what happened to them. And they're like, oh, well, you have a lot of money, you can afford therapy. You know what I mean? Like me, like I didn't have therapy my whole life, like I had to like make my own therapy by reading Wayne Dyer books, like I had to make my own therapy. And, a lot of women, they've just told me how grateful they are that I've said something. And I still haven't even shared my whole entire story yet. I do have a blog post that I'm going to be publishing that's, much more in details about, my rape experience and a lot of the just society stigmas that go around it. Like, because, the reason why I didn't say anything is I thought I was going to lose all my friends. I thought they were going to judge me and they weren't going to believe me. And it is true. A lot of times when a woman says something happened to her, people don't believe her. That's pretty common. So, there's a lot of society things that still we're working out, those kinks. It's kind of the same thing of like having to be grateful that Donald Trump is the president. Yeah, I hate the guy's guts, but I'm grateful he's the president because it's bringing all those shadow things out. And sometimes these shadow things need to come out so we can actually clean them up. Mm-hmm. And we can't clean up the energy if we don't know what that bad stuff is. And so it's been a really interesting past, like I said, 2017 has been a kind of crazy year for a lot of people. It's been very emotional. I mean, there was all these floods that were happening and hurricanes and like fires. There's a fire even happening right now, in California. There's like, it's been a very ferocious year for a lot of people. And it's just been all that shadow stuff coming out. And I feel like, cause you always talk about the winds guiding us, you know, and I feel like we are being guided. And some of this junk is coming up, but it's time to start clearing that clutter, clearing that energy, you know, finding and speaking our truth. Like when something comes up for me, like I remember I said something to my boyfriend the other day, and then I stopped and I said, wait, I didn't mean to say that. Like saying that is actually me wanting to manipulate you in some way. Like it might not seem like it because it's like a subtle thing, because it's just like how people normally conversate and talk to each other. And then I was like, well, so I take that back. I was like, no, scratch that. Like that's not what I wanted to say. And he was just like, that is so crazy. Like that you were actually doing this right now. Like saying like, no, scratch that. Like delete that from, you know, what I said. Like I didn't say that. And he's like, I've never met anybody that would do that. You know, most people just, you know, try to cover it up or brush it off later or something, you know. But I had to tell him, I said, you know, that's not the person I want to be. Like, I don't want to change you in any way, and I don't expect you to change me in any way. And so I think that, you know, once we start fessing up to those shadow things that happen to us, you know, because obviously, you know, I was raised in a very abusive household. And so I'm still to this day learning how to communicate in a way where I'm not trying to get my way, because we had to be like very, very, very selfish in my home in order to even be heard, you know? And so I'm still breaking down those habits and breaking down those things of how my brain is wired. And it's really just being conscious about it. And so even like my new relationships, I'm like kind of, it's like all of this stuff, all the shadows are coming out, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so many shadows. But I feel like I'm able to finally, you know, address them one at a time and not be overwhelmed by it. I started a journal yesterday that was like all my shadows. And I started like writing down like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I do that. Or I say that to people. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so mean. Like, why was I being so mean like that? You know, like, oh, what is wrong with me? You know, but then I have to remember, you know, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just at that point, I wasn't in alignment. I wasn't connected to source at that point. And so I'm like, okay, how can I prevent this from happening? Because if I'm connected to source, then I'm not going to be behaving in that way, because I'm going to be behaving in, you know, the pure healthy way. My relationships will be healthy. The speech that comes out of my mouth will be healthy. The connections I'm growing will be healthy. So yeah, so it's just been really interesting with building new relationships, building new friendships. I have a lot of new friends I've recently made. And so, you know, I downloaded the Bumble dating app, and so learning to communicate has been kind of funny, because I was just like, how do you like just talk to like a random stranger, you know? So it's been really interesting. But again, it's just the shadows keep coming up, and I'm becoming grateful for those shadows, because I know if the shadows are there, that means that it's time to make a little shift on those shadows, and hopefully the shadows will start not being so shadowy anymore. I think we always will have shadows. I don't think anybody can clear themselves of every shadow, because your life would just be so boring if you were perfect, right? And you wouldn't even want to live if everything was, you'd be so bored, you know? So we all have these little shadows, and I think that there's just a lot coming up lately. It like kind of like a massive, not just as individuals, but like as a society, there's just been a lot, and things are starting to clear, and I feel really, really good about 2018. I think 2018 is going to be a very, very enlightening year for a lot of people, for a lot of businesses. I feel a lot of big companies. I mean, even when you look at some of the bigger companies, you know, they're just, you know, firing people because they're like, oh, you're accused of sexual assault, peace out, get out of here, you know. And so these companies are becoming enlightened. Rather than brushing that stuff under the rug like they used to, they're saying like, nope, not tolerating it anymore. And we're going to live in a different world in the next, you know, 10, 15 years. My kids, it's going to be very different for them. When it comes to things like, you know, sexual assault or just people harassing people and things like that, it's going to be a way different world because people aren't going to tolerate it anymore. I think it's just been, the nasty stuff has been tolerated for too long. Now we need to learn how to heal, though. Like, how do we help these men heal? And I had saw a thing where this guy had posted, he said, me too. He said, yeah, me too. I've been, you know, harassed and you know, by women, and women have tried to manipulate me with sex and things like that. But he's like, but I also have assaulted people, or not necessarily assaulted, but harassed people or said things that were inappropriate to people. And I think that that men are wanting to heal too. And so there's a lot of this women empowerment stuff going on, but I'm really excited for the men empowerment stuff to happen. Like, I'm so excited for it because that's where my boys are going to be. You know, I have 3 boys and I want them to feel empowered too. Like, and so yes, women are kind of leading the way, but I posted a thing yesterday on my Facebook page, and this one guy, he's an actor, and he was like, you know, like, where are the men at? Like, let's let the men, you know, connect with their feelings, connect with themselves, and learn to become more peaceful beings, and just listen to what the women are saying. And it was just really, really powerful TED Talk. And I think that it's now time that men are going to be stepping up, and men are going to be taking the lead, but in a different way, you know. And so it's going to be interesting the next few years, I think. So I'm excited for it. I love new things and new changes. And I think society is finally growing. I think it took a lot of, you know, turmoil, but I think the growth is now happening.
Great. You kind of answered my last question for you as we come to a wrap here. But so what advice, let's take you back to business for 1 second. So what advice would you leave people with for 2018 about their business? I
would say to really focus on being vulnerable and visible. I guess the 2 V's, vulnerable and visible. A lot of people, they want to serve, and they say, oh, you know, it's hard to get out in front of people and things like that. And yes, it can be hard to go out and do a bunch of live streams and record videos and things like that. But being visible to me really just means talking to another person about what you do. You know, when you're in line at Starbucks, you can talk to a person and let them know what you do and the things you're passionate about and you care about and how you want to change the world. And they're not going to think you're a freak, because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I want to change the world too. We all want to do it together, right? You know, so getting visible is definitely very important for 2018. And then being vulnerable. I think people really want to work with people or connect with people that are just being real and authentic, and not just, you know, showing their Instagram with all the pretty stuff that's happening, because that sort of stuff, it really just creates competition. I was in this one Facebook group, and it's a group, they primarily talk about sex topics, but they had asked something about mothering, and they had said, you know, mothering seems to have became like this masculine thing. And it is true, it has become a masculine thing, because you're basically working, and then you're working some more, and then you're working some more on top of that, and then you're working some more again. And instead of just being a nurturer and a person who cuddles with their children, you're the disciplinary, you're just like, here, eat this food, shove it down your throat, you know, put your shoes on, we got to go out the door. Like, you know, like it became like masculine. And then there became all this competition. And I think if 2018 could be like the year of us to like stop competing, you know, especially with mothers, we compare ourselves to each other constantly, which comparison and competition is in the masculine. And we need it, the mothers especially need to have somewhere that feminine juice, because we've been being so masculine for so long, because, you know, society isn't okay with like men having that feminine side. So there's like, it's like our whole household to just become masculine, you know? And so I feel like if we can stop competing, stop comparing ourselves to others, and just be vulnerable and speak our truths, that's what's going to really propel businesses next year, is that vulnerability. Just be real, be who you are. If you make mistakes, be okay with the fact that you make mistakes, because in business, you're always going to make a ton of mistakes. I tell people all the time, I say the only reason why I have success is because I failed so many freaking times, you know, like, and I'm constantly failing. Like, even the other day, it's like, oh, sent an email, oh, that was a total fail, you know, whatever, you know, like, it just happens, you know. And so we have to be okay with being vulnerable, and I admit those types of mistakes and things to my audience, and I let them know, like, hey, like, sorry, you know, I haven't been as present with you guys, or I haven't been creating as much content for you guys, or, you know, like, I'm always doing my best to just be open and honest with my audience and with my students. And I think that's all. Vulnerability is always the way to go.
Absolutely. I do that all the time on the Win Clan, and people who are like, you know, kind of just looky-loos over there say, I can't believe how honest you are with, and transparent. But that's what I think this wind work is all about, is the transparency and starting to move with nature. Kimra, I'm really thrilled we had an opportunity to sit here and do this together. And I wish you so much happiness and joy in your new home. And I look forward to watching you as you develop over this new version of your vulnerable, transparent, visible self.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really great. I loved being able to share kind of this different side of me. And I look forward to sharing this out with my audience because I think they're going to love this interview.
I think they will too. And anyone who got here through Kimra sharing it out with her audience, come on over to the iamsymposium.com to get the schedule and to get all the free gifts. Kimra's going to have a gift on our gift page, and we stay tuned. There's still many days to come. Thank you.